Right, now we're going to look at a 6-step model of crisis intervention. Step 1 is defining the problem. Now this might sound pretty obvious, but two people sitting in the same room can actually think that they're talking about two different things. And you may, as the professional, believe that what the client is talking about is actually not the issue, and the issue might be something else. And so the client might come in and go, "No, you know, my neighbour keeps making like rattling noises at 10 o'clock at night, and so I blare my guitar for the next 6 days and they keep rattling." It's those kind of, that was a bit of perhaps a lame example, but it's those kind of examples where you might be sitting there and going, that client actually hasn't clearly thought about what the issue is. The client might be coming in and saying, "Oh, crisis is that my teacher keeps telling me off all the time because I'm not doing my homework." And your response is that you think that the client should be doing their homework. And so it's those kinds of those kind of situations where we're sitting down with our client that it's really important to define the crisis or even the issue, and then so you're both moving together, discussing the same topic. And it's really important that we have a positive regard for our client, meaning that we believe them, and that it may be that the client has never had someone before that has believed them. And it's important to be able to weigh up, when a client comes in, and the attitude and the positive sense where we're going to discuss with our client about their issue. And it's very important that when a client sits down with them that we're saying that we care about them and that we really want them to be able to achieve the outcome that they're looking for. Step 2 is to ensure client safety. And this is step 2, but it's really a fluid step, meaning that it should be in each of the 6 steps. You're always looking about how do you protect yourself, how do you protect the client? Is the discussion that we're having safe? Is the action plan that we're putting in place safe? Is it safe physically? Is it safe for them psychologically? Am I putting them up against potentially more trauma by making them work through this pattern? So it's always very important to be aware of your policies and procedures in your organisation so that you can make sure that you're keeping everyone safe. The third step is to provide support. And this flows on from the previous 2 steps, where we're just saying that a client may never have heard that somebody cares about them. It's very, very important that as youth workers that we say that, and we use that language and say, "Thanks for coming in, thank you for sharing that information with me, I care about you, let's see if we can resolve this." And we understand from Lloyd Martin's book, The Invisible Table, when he discusses risk and resilience, and he talks about adding positive adult role models into a young person's life can really increase their resilience. And you get to be that person. You get to be that person that provides that support and provides that adult role model so that you can work with a client in maybe perhaps a way that they've never been worked with before. Step 4 is to examine the alternatives. And maybe it's that the clients come in to see you, and you quite quickly notice that they haven't thought about this really easy resolution. Maybe there's a service that's an offer or a grant you can apply for, or funding in a certain way that can just totally resolve their crisis. And that's the end of the issue, or that's the end of the crisis. And so it may be that through you sitting with them and looking at all the different options that you can come up with one that resolve things quite quickly. And there's 3 different things to consider. One of them is to consider situational supports. Remember, we talked about systems theory. Who is in their natural support systems that can be supportive, that can be helpful, that can be guiding. Secondly, what coping mechanisms could they use? Maybe it's speaking to a friend. Maybe it's coming in and spending time at a drop-in service. Maybe it's being sporty. Maybe it's being physical. Maybe it's spending a bit of extra time with your friends, about engaging with your local community, maybe hanging out at your local church with the youth pastor. Maybe it's something there that it's a coping mechanism that they haven't considered. And thirdly, positive and constructive thinking patterns, meaning what can the client be saying to themselves to be able to remind them that, hey, maybe things are okay, or maybe, yes, I can do this, or maybe if those things aren't true, no, like, Carl is here to help me. Carl is here to support me. Carl is my case manager. Carl is my coordinator. I'll go to Carl, and Carl will be able to help me with a plan. So it's those kind of things that you constantly want to be able to think with a client when they're sitting down, so that you can express all those alternatives. It's also very, very important that when you meet with a client that you're not throwing 500 different options at them. And it might be in your experience that you've been doing it for years and years and years, and over time you've got 500 different options that they can choose from. You don't want to put that on a whiteboard for a client. Just pick the best 2 or 3 and then discuss them. And if they go, oh, none of them are helpful, then by all means look at something else. But don't overwhelm your client and don't tell them everything that you're thinking. Make sure that you've got a really grounded approach and maybe a quick 2 or 3 different ways that you believe has been the most helpful. Step 5 is making a plan. Now, making a plan needs to happen in collaboration. Making a plan isn't getting something down on paper, giving it to them and saying, this is the answer. Answers aren't in books. Answers happen in collaboration with the client. You might say, all right, you've got a crisis. All right, cool, well, I'm going to get my crisis intervention book and I'm going to give that to the client, and then they're going to read that and everything's going to be fine. And we all know that it doesn't happen that way. And that when we're working with a client, they need to agree and they need to want to be able to action that plan. When you sit down with a client and they're crying and they're feeling anxious and you say, go and do this, it may be they're very, very quick to say, yeah, no worries. Because they just want to be out of that room. Maybe they're forced to come and see you, or maybe they're a very agreeable person. It's really your job as a youth worker to be able to say, what steps would be helpful in our pathway forward? Here are a few. What do you believe is the best way forward? What are the pros and cons? Maybe do like a cost-benefit analysis. So say, okay, if we choose this option, what is the cost going to be? Okay, what's the benefit going to be? And that might be a way for you to be able to move forward and really have them feel and believe and know that it's their plan and that you've collaborated with them and then you've been supportive. And the 6th one is to say, is to obtain commitment. Say, who's doing what? Are you doing the plan, or am I doing the plan? Are you doing the first steps? Am I doing the next steps? It might be that part of the plan is to be able to book an appointment with a drug and alcohol counsellor. That might be your job as a youth worker. And then it might be the client's job to make sure that they're at the next 3 appointments, or it might be the client's job to make sure they get they head into the city to birth, deaths and marriages to be able to get their birth certificate. It may be that you're sharing part of the pathway forward. So when we say obtain commitment, what we're really saying is to have the client agree to the plan, and then to have the client know exactly what is going to be happening in the way forward and what is a clear pathway for their commitment.